Good evening from New York. I'm Dan Rather with news, analysis, and commentary. President Trump today tweeted out praise for Sinclair Media Group, calling the owner and operator of 193 local TV stations around the country, quote, far superior to CNN and NBC. The apparent reason, a video about Sinclair Media Group that went viral this weekend. Here's what you should know about that video and about Sinclair Media. They own more TV stations than anyone else, and they're about to own some 40 more when they finish their purchase of the Tribune Company, which also has at least 10 major newspapers. You may have heard that Sinclair's owners are self-described conservatives, what some other people call hard-right reactionaries. That's not uncommon among media moguls. And Sinclair last year lobbied hard to undo a regulation called the main studio rule. Now, the main studio rule requires that local TV stations actually be local in some sense, not just a signal beamed in from corporate headquarters hundreds or thousands of miles away. Local studios, local reporters, local viewpoints about local issues. In October, Sinclair succeeded in getting the main studio rule killed by a party line vote in the Federal Communications Commission. Media companies argued that the money they save will let them serve local communities better. But these days, Sinclair is serving local communities with content like last month's commentary by former Trump advisor Sebastian Gorka, warning about the so-called deep state conspiracy undermining President Trump. And Sinclair's local stations have to run commentaries by former Trump advisor Boris Epstein, warning all local communities that there's too much national coverage of Stormy Daniels. Last month, CNN obtained a script that Sinclair sent to their local stations, a script telling them they all had to read it on air, frequently, in place of news. The promo script was all about fake news, the supposed danger of believing other news media, the kind of media that just might be critical of President Trump. Now the promos have been taped and they are on the air. A compilation video of them by Timothy Burke at Deadspin went viral this weekend. We share it with you now, not to embarrass any of the anchors here who were told they had to tape these, but because it demonstrates the grinding erasure of local viewpoints at the largest group of local stations in America. Corporate headquarters decided this was an issue of local concern in every locality. Corporate headquarters wrote the script. Corporate headquarters gave all its viewers the same voice, the same words.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about trouble and irresponsible one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
false news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these stories are true without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. Here is the unvarnished truth. Big media corporations are in bed with big government in Washington, regardless of which party is in power, for their mutual purposes, not for the benefit of quality news coverage. News anchors looking into camera and reading a script handed down by a corporate overlord, a script meant to obscure the truth, not elucidate it, is not journalism. It is propaganda. It's Orwellian, and it is on a slippery slope towards some of history's most destructive forces. These are the means by which despots wrest power, silence dissent, and oppress the masses. To those who say this rhetoric is hyperbolic, I submit that attacking the press as honest brokers of information has been one of the constants of this administration and all those who normalize it. But this is not normal. This is not how the freedoms enshrined in our Constitution, that beloved First Amendment, is supposed to operate. So, in the spirit of answering speech with speech, let me offer my own script. I'm Dan Rather, and I'm concerned about the troubling trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country. The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common in corporate media. More alarming, some corporate media publish these same fake stories, stories that just don't matter, without checking with their journalists first. Unfortunately, some media executives use their local platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to trying to control exactly what people think. This is extremely dangerous to our democracy. Sinclair's promos, by the way, end with anchors telling viewers to email them if they think the station's coverage is unfair. But those complaints don't go to the local stations. The emails are read and replied to by employees at Sinclair headquarters. And by the way, if you're really interested in identifying fake news and figuring out what to believe, if you're truly invested in the work of being a good, informed citizen, may I respectfully offer a short primer. Number one, understand that trusting a news outlet does not mean they're perfect. No one's perfect. It means they tell you when they screw up. Number two, don't rely on just one news outlet. Number three, don't rely on just the news to understand an issue. Read books, find the experts, find out how issues are discussed outside of news. Number four, if you find yourself agreeing with everything your news outlet says, you're doing it wrong. If your news doesn't challenge you, challenge your news. Now, number five, find a commentator whose politics differ from yours, intellectually honest even though their values differ from yours. If you can't find such a person, maybe the media is not the problem. And number six, remember that what the news tells you is far less important than what they decide to talk about in the first place. If they focus on personal, salacious, and speculative stories, find a new outlet, one that drills in on issues that actually affect real lives, your wallet or pocketbook, health and education, schools, social justice, the environment. The true test of trustworthy journalism isn't that they never make mistakes. It's whether they're willing to challenge the powers that be on behalf of those without power. Now, I want to talk about the gun debate and the Parkland voices not being heard, and I'll do that right after this. I see what we all see, the deep divisions, the endemic injustices, the uncertainty about our future. We have sometimes stumbled. We have sometimes fallen short. But we can renew our national purpose if we recognize that what unites us is far greater and stronger than all that divides us.
Look, we're doing interviews over there at youtube.com/TYT interviews, and we've done some amazing ones recently.
So now, of course, you know the person most widely considered to be the most progressive senator is Bernie Sanders. Yeah. Why not back him during the 2016 primaries? Why be a Democrat at all?
And we're in a time where you cannot, in good conscience, sit on the sidelines of history.
Laura Ingraham of Fox News apologized and took this week off after mocking one of the Parkland school shooting survivors and losing advertisers in the process. But no national TV news outlet has apologized for or even truly acknowledged the scarcity of black voices from Parkland in their discourse about guns. More than 1 in 10 Parkland students are black, but they hardly get a tenth of our attention. On Wednesday, several of them held a news conference trying to rectify that.
The Black Lives Matter movement has been addressing this topic since the murder of Trayvon Martin in 2012. Yet we have never seen this kind of support for our cause, and we surely do not feel that the lives or voices of minorities are valued as much as those of our white counterparts. I am here today with my classmates because we have been sorely underrepresented and in some cases misrepresented.
We are proud to say that we're from Douglas. We are proud to say that those who are in the front are doing a great job, but we also, as you can see, have so much to say.
Yes, they do. And one thing they had to say concerned the proposed response of putting more armed officers into America's schools. It's understandable that some black students might see armed security in their schools differently than many of their white schoolmates do, especially when students of African American heritage are 3 times more likely than white students to be expelled or suspended from school. Police, guns, discipline, in the eyes and minds of many black students, they do not automatically add up to safety and security. When black people, even young black people, talk about guns and violence, they are heard differently, if they are heard at all. Consider how polarizing Black Lives Matter was compared to the Parkland students. Imagine if the March for Our Lives had been held last year by black students. This week will mark 50 years since the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. went to Memphis to support striking sanitation workers. On Wednesday, April 4th, it will be 50 years to the day since he was struck down there in Memphis by gun violence, fighting for the right of Americans to join together and to speak with one voice, fighting for the right to be heard. The battle to be heard behind the closed doors of a top American gunmaker just took a fierce turn, if an obscure SEC filing is any indication. We've reported to you before about Sturm Ruger, maker of the rifle used in the Texas church shooting last year. We revealed on this newscast, Ruger did not warn its potential investors that the company might suffer in the event of high-profile gun crimes, or if pro-gun election victories made gun sales drop, exactly what happened with President Trump. Ruger is also under pressure from its biggest investors. The private equity firm BlackRock, which owns 17% of Ruger, wrote to them last month specifically about gun violence, asking what Ruger plans to do about it and the risks to investors. Ruger's answer was nothing new. Now, as the Young Turks just reported, Ruger's latest SEC filing has the company's board of directors telling shareholders to vote against a resolution that would require Ruger to monitor violence committed with Ruger firearms and report on it by early next year. The resolution is being proposed by a socially active Catholic order in Oregon. It will be voted on by Ruger's shareholders at their annual meeting next month. So will the board of directors. All 9 are up for re-election, including Chairman C. Michael Jacoby, who also sits on the board of the private prison company Core Civic, formerly known as the Corrections Corporation of America; Michael Pfeiffer, member of the Board of Governors of the National Shooting Sports Foundation, which lobbies against new gun laws; Sandra Froman, member of the NRA's Board of Directors; and CEO Chris Killoy, a top NRA supporter and former Smith & Wesson executive. The whole idea that a small religious order of nuns might overturn the Ruger board is unrealistic. But here's the thing. More than half of Ruger stock is owned by just 6 private financial firms. Out of Ruger's 17 million shares, BlackRock owns almost 3 million. Vanguard owns more than 1.5 million. Capital World Investors of San Francisco and the London Company of Virginia own more than 1 million shares each. And both Voya Investment Management and Dimensional Fund Advisors own well over 500,000 shares. BlackRock, we told you, is pushing gun companies to respond to gun violence. Vanguard has said it supports legislative efforts to do so. In other words, these 6 companies on their own could force Ruger to report on its gun violence or toss out the board of directors. Because at a certain point, these gun makers are going to become toxic for anyone to own. It's not personal, Ruger. It's just business. Now, we're going to connect some dots behind President Trump firing his Veterans Affairs Secretary, and you want to hear that right after this.
All right, well, the Young Turks special election day coverage dropping.
An amazing power panel.
Look at this panel. You want to talk about power?
Like a smart Destiny's Child.
We're all too strong.
We start a revolution. Yes, another one.
Aren't you excited?
Wow.
Some of the best writers in the country are right here on this panel, with the obvious exception of John Irola.
Let's not so quickly discount Harry Potter fan fiction.
We have elected the top Twitter troll in the country.
What ran me away from Christianity was judgment and condemnation.
Assaulting peaceful protesters in North Dakota, crazier than bombing Yemen, crazier than bombing Syria so much they ran out of bombs.
Reductive interpretation of what their motives are, what Putin's are, by these amateur experts is just beyond.
We don't kill our journalists, and they do.
If you want to know what's really going on with President Trump's firing of Secretary of Veterans Affairs David Shokhin, it's important to understand who was behind it. In a stunning op-ed last week after he was fired, Shokhin said that, and I quote, "Advocates within the administration for privatizing VA health services saw me as an obstacle to privatization who had to be removed. That is because I am convinced that privatization is a political issue aimed at rewarding select people and companies with profits, even if it undermines care for veterans," unquote. Shokhin doesn't say who those privatization advocates are, but President Trump's plans for the VA have been leaning toward privatizing veterans' health care. A broad spectrum of veterans groups is deeply opposed to privatizing the VA. Despite its occasional scandals, the agency enjoys high satisfaction ratings from veterans, better than private providers and insurance companies do. According to a report in Politico, Trump's desire to privatize the VA has been influenced by Jeff Miller. He's former chairman of the House Veterans Committee. Miller's aide went to work for Shokhin and was reportedly one of the Trump loyalists in the VA who helped push Shokhin out. One of the people pushing for privatization is Stephen A. Cohen. He is a hedge fund billionaire and one of the richest people in the country. Until this year, he was not allowed to invest other people's money thanks to an insider trading scandal. In 2013, as prosecutors began sniffing around, Cohen started giving to veterans charities. In 2016, he founded Cohen Veterans Networks, a chain of clinics offering veterans and families free or low-cost care. Free, that is, to the patients. The clinics get reimbursed when they can, and they want to get reimbursed more. Last year, Cohen spent $290,000 on lobbying for, quote, efforts to increase access to mental health care for veterans and efforts to increase federal funding for PTSD-related research, unquote. The lobbyist Cohen turned to was Jeff Miller, Trump's advisor on veterans issues. Miller is now a lobbyist. Cohen was his first client. The law prohibited Miller from lobbying Congress, and his disclosure forms indicate he was doing, quote, executive branch lobbying only. Cohen says he was motivated by his son's military service in Afghanistan. But Cohen has also thrown money at Donald Trump, including $1 million for the Trump inauguration and millions more to Republicans who favor clinics like his over the VA. And Cohen is not Miller's only client. After switching from heading the Veterans Committee in Congress to lobbying last year, he signed up several health industry companies with stakes in privatizing veterans' care, including some specifically targeted at veteran patients. Even with Shokhin at the helm, Cohen locked up a partnership in February with the VA that, according to the press release, may lead to Cohen Veterans Network expanding. Look, it's a fine and noble instinct to want to expand choice and improve service for Americans' veterans, as it is for all Americans. But those leading the charge for this oppose funding government efforts to expand choice and improve service. Those leading the charge insist that the private sector is better at it, even while the Cohen Veterans Network admits publicly they are learning best practices from the VA. Choice, access to service, these are the words used publicly by those who privately assault the very notion of government serving any of its people for any needs the private sector can charge for. Just look at who's lining up to fill Shokhin's shoes. Trump wants his own White House physician, a doctor, a man who has never run a large organization. He wants him to run the VA. Until then, the president said, the VA will be run by a Pentagon undersecretary named Robert Wilkie, former advisor to Republican Senator Tom Tillis, a vocal champion of choice. Teachers walked off the job today in red states. Some analysis and commentary on what they're doing is straight ahead.
Hey, Dave. As you can probably see, Skype froze. Froze and crashed.
You know, I'm watching that documentary on the Vietnam War, and there was a TV journalist in the middle of some tiny little village in Vietnam doing live TV as the soldiers were burning the Vietnamese huts, and it didn't crash. And that was 1965, and he was in Vietnam.
Look, we're doing interviews over there at youtube.com/TYT interviews, and we've done some amazing ones recently.
So now, of course, you know the person most widely considered to be the most progressive senator is Bernie Sanders.
Yep.
Why not back him during the 2016 primaries? Why be a Democrat at all?
And we're in a time where you cannot, in good conscience, sit on the sidelines of history.
Finally tonight, if this country is to continue to thrive and progress, it must be led by its educators, particularly its teachers, most specifically, its public school teachers, Listen, I respect and admire dedicated teachers wherever they teach. Public schools, private, charter, religious, and homeschoolers. All of them. But there is a special place in my heart, and I think there should be in the hearts of all citizens, for those who teach in our public schools. Teachers in general, but public school teachers especially, are the all too often unheralded, neglected, and underpaid backbone of this nation. And that's why I'm so inspired and encouraged by what is one of the more underreported stories of recent weeks. Something is stirring in traditionally red states. Teachers are fighting back after being pushed to desperation by years of shrinking education budgets from state capitals bent on short-sighted, tax-cut, frenzied economic policies. In West Virginia, a teacher strike led to a pay increase, and similar movements are now fomenting in Kentucky, Oklahoma, and Arizona, as we saw with mass walkouts today. Because here's the reality. Most parents, no matter their party affiliation, want good schools for their kids. Communities understand the importance of good school districts. Businesses need well-trained workers. America needs an educated populace. Sadly, public education has become a political battleground. But I believe the efforts we're seeing play out today will be successful and that others will likely follow. We need to break our cycle of cynicism. We need to recognize the importance of education and those who dedicate themselves to these lives of service to our future generations. Public schools must be part of what unites us. Yes, this is, in addition to everything else, personal for me. I would not be where I am today without dedicated teachers who believed in me and opened my eyes to new horizons. And I know millions of my fellow citizens feel the same way. We know that we succeeded because how they have helped us. Now, they need our help, and they will succeed if we help them. With that, I leave you for this news cycle. The Young Turks is next, and we'll be back with the news at this same place and time, 5:30 Eastern, every Monday. Until then, Dan Rather reporting. Stay steady. I see what we all see. The deep divisions, the endemic injustices, the uncertainty about our future. We have sometimes stumbled. We have sometimes fallen short. But we can renew our national purpose if we recognize that what unites us is far greater and stronger than all that divides us.
Look, we're doing interviews over there at youtube.com/TYT interviews, and we've done some amazing ones recently.
So now, of course, you know the person most widely considered to be the most progressive senator is Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Why not back him during the 2016 primaries? Why be a Democrat at all?
And we're in the time where you cannot, in good conscience, sit on the sidelines of history.